We begin this hour with President Trump's war in Iran, where a permanent end remains as uncertain as ever, while what the White House still insists is a ceasefire is tested. Meanwhile, as our colleague Jonathan Lemire writes in The Atlantic, an outside advisor says Trump is, quote, bored with the war he started, and, quote, he doesn't want it to upend his high-stakes summit next week in China. He is ready to move on. So he shouldn't start wars then. That's been clear from his shifting language about the conflict. Just a week ago, he dismissed the role of Congress, telling congressional leaders that hostilities have terminated to circumvent the war powers resolution, only to say this hours later.
We're in a war because I think you would agree we cannot let lunatics have a nuclear weapon. Do you agree?
We're in a war, but then maybe we're not. It's very unclear. But this week, as the tenuous pause in hostilities becomes more questionable, he's had a different take.
We're in I call it a mini war because that's all they are. We're in a little skirmish, military. I call it a skirmish because Iran has no chance. I call it a skirmish because that's what it is. It's a skirmish. And we're doing unbelievably well.
After these strikes, is the ceasefire with Iran still on?
Yeah, it is. They trifled with us today. We blew them away. They trifled. I call that a trifle.
Trifle, skirmish, war. Words used to mean things. Joining us now, Congressman Adam Smith of Washington State, ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Language does matter. And the President of the United States calling this a skirmish, an excursion, all of those things help us to and lead us to believe the reporting that's been out there for really months that the president is bored with this. While the American people are suffering, while 13 American service members that we know of have been killed, while hundreds and hundreds of maybe even thousands of people in the Middle East are constantly being sent away from their homes. Talk a little bit about the disconnect between what we're seeing with the president and the actual status of what's happening on the ground.
Well, I think you nailed it up front. I mean, President Trump wants to act like words and facts no longer matter. I like the way he says, that's what I call it. Okay. As if he has, some unique language and unique take on the world that the rest of us don't see. But the truth is, words and facts do still matter. Trump tries very hard, and frankly, it scares me the degree to which he is successful in fooling people into thinking that they don't, but they do. And the truth of what's going on right now is that we are stuck because Iran doesn't want to negotiate about what we want to negotiate. Up front, the president thought that a 4 to 6 week bombing campaign with that initial, quote, decapitation strike, end quote, that Iran basically would buckle in the face of that. Now, all of the experts who looked at it before that, including me serving on the Armed Services Committee, said, no, that's not going to work. 4 to 6 weeks into it being obvious that it wasn't going to work. So Iran was still standing. Meanwhile, the costs that you outlined had been incurred. 13 service members killed, hundreds wounded, thousands of civilians killed, the global economy in free fall, gas prices, fertilizer, all of that had happened. And we hadn't gotten any closer to accomplishing our goals. So step 2 was blockade, thinking that the blockade could cause that. And experts are saying that that won't cause Iran to cave either. So the blockade is now the fight. Now, the truth of the matter is blockade occasionally requires shooting because sometimes you have to blockade, people push back. So no, it's not a ceasefire. We've just moved from a war where Trump thought bombing would achieve objectives to a war he thinks a blockade, which, by the way, is an act of war.
Exactly.
We're doing less shooting, but not a ceasefire. And those are the facts. That's what's out there. He can call it whatever he wants to call it, but that's what's going on.
Congressman, I want to ask you about the China of it all, because as Eugene mentioned at the top, the president is heading to China next week. I'm going to be heading there soon to cover his trip when he meets with President Xi Jinping. But what do you expect China will try to extract from the United States, extract from the president, in exchange for their help with negotiating a potential end to the Iran war?
Well, I think it's just another sort of card that China has to play, to use one of Trump's favorite phrases, in the challenge that we have with China, which is how to compete with them in a rational way. I actually led a congressional delegation to China last September, the first one that had gone in a number of years. And the conversations were interesting. China is less combative towards the U.S. than they were 3-4 years ago. Part of that is underrated. The Biden administration did a decent job of trying to calm those things down and actually have a rational conversation with China. But we still have big differences of opinion, primarily over economics, but also China wants to have a greater say in the rules-based international order. And I think China will use the situation in Iran to try to leverage more power for them and a better economic deal. And they have a lot of leverage here. Because going back to the blockade, presumption of the blockade is it will force Iran to crumble because their economy will fall apart. Well, China's going to have a ton to say about that. If China keeps helping Iran economically, that dramatically extends the amount of time that Iran can survive this blockade. So I think China has more leverage now because of the weak position Trump has put us in with regard to the war, not just in Iran, but the war in the Middle East.
Congressman, I want to ask you about a different global adversary, the Russia of it all. The New York Times reported this week that Russia is shipping drone components to Iran via the Caspian Sea. This is according to U.S. officials, helping Iran rebuild its offensive abilities after losing roughly 60% of its drone arsenal during recent fighting. These officials spoke anonymously to divulge private military assessments. First of all, have you been briefed about the possibility that Russia is shipping drone components? And secondly, there's been a lot of speculation that actually it was China that was replenishing Iran's military capabilities and missiles and assisting them with keeping their stockpiles up. And so obviously the meeting this week could address that, but what could be done to try to counter what Russia is doing now?
Yeah, well, it seems to be a little of both. In fact, that adds to the point I made a moment ago. Russia, too, is trying to find ways to help Iran. If Iran was truly isolated, that would be different in terms of how effective a blockade could be. But they're not, and they're not because of what you just said. Both Russia and China are finding ways to help them. The details of that, we're not 100% sure on all aspects of it. A, B, some of it is classified, but there's no question Russia and China are helping Iran, and that makes it tougher to bring Iran to heel, basically. And that's the global picture, something that Trump, who doesn't have much of a detailed understanding of anything, didn't see. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and also various terrorist organizations all have one thing in common. They want to weaken the United States. And increasingly in recent years, they are finding ways to work together, even though there's big differences between all those groups I just mentioned. The one thing they have in common is they think a weaker U.S. gives them a freer hand in the world. So they will find ways to work together, which is also why it's so important that we stand with Ukraine. And the Trump administration has struggled to do that. And there's a lot of different facts there. But the way I always like to sum it up, Trump rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, has constantly praised him. He brought Zelensky into the Oval Office and basically belittled and insulted him for an hour. So he undermined our ability to clearly stand with Ukraine, a place where Russia is in big trouble. But that's the picture. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, various terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, they all want to weaken us. They're working together. So just stumbling into a war in the Middle East just empowered that group it weakened us on our own. And Trump should have seen that coming.
Congressman, on the politics of it, your counterpart in the Senate, Roger Wicker, was saying that the public understands the necessity of the Iran war. Do you think that the public understands?
Well, no, I don't even know that Trump understands it, because he keeps saying they can't have a nuclear weapon. They didn't have a nuclear weapon when this war started. In fact, we were in negotiations to try to make it less likely that Iran would get one. Again, the details of what they have is classified. I've been briefed on it. There's a breakout time, how long it would take them to build one. They're not there yet, but they're close. So negotiating a way to reduce their likelihood of getting a nuclear weapon was our best path forward when Trump started this war. So, no, I don't think the American public understands fully why Trump is doing this war, because Trump doesn't. And again, I think the truth of it is he made an impulse decision, thinking he could be the guy who would bring down the Iranian regime once and for all, something that factually it was very clear wasn't going to happen, and that the cost of trying was going to escalate day by day, week by week to an entirely unacceptable level. But he took that shot. He took that chance. If nuclear weapons was what this was about, then we were in a stronger position before this war started to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon than we are now.
Donald Trump's war of choice with Iran and the energy crisis that it has caused is destroying American businesses. And that America First corporate graveyard is the subject of tonight's prime time focus. In the middle of this wartime energy crunch, the Trump administration is actually paying some American companies and other companies not to build energy. Yes, really, almost $2 billion taxpayer dollars being handed to developers in exchange for shutting down offshore wind projects. Wind that would have powered 4 million American homes. Some of those companies got paid to cancel projects they hadn't even started building. As one report put it, the government is paying Total Energies to halt a wind farm it isn't constructing in exchange for fossil fuel investments Total Energies was already going to make anyway. Although, we should note, the government argues this payout is a reimbursement from initial fees. But the list of corporate casualties is getting hard to keep track of. Spirit Airlines, gone. QVC, bankrupt. Jo-Ann Fabrics, completely liquidated. American Farm bankruptcies, up 46% last year. Manufacturing, 80,000 jobs fewer today than the day Trump took office. And in the kind of twist you almost couldn't make up, Whirlpool, the company that Donald Trump personally celebrated as the breakout success of his first-term tariffs, told investors this week that the Iran war has caused, quote, recession-level industry decline right here in the U.S. That was the original tariff winner, now warning of recession.
American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream.
Trump promised a manufacturing renaissance. He promised farmers prosperity. He promised cheaper energy. Instead, his tariffs raised costs, and his war with Iran sent diesel and fertilizer prices soaring. There is an economic serial killer on the loose. He says he's working for you. The graveyard tells a different story. Joining us now to discuss is Tim O'Brien, senior executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion and an MS Now political analyst, and Natasha Soren, professor at Yale Law School and president of the Budget Lab at Yale. So, Tim, I want to start with you. I feel like we talk a lot on our show about how the president has weaponized the government to punish companies he doesn't like. Law firms, colleges, media companies, things like that. I feel like we don't talk enough about the companies that Trump destroys by accident because he kind of doesn't understand how his policies work.
And we're in the very early stages of, I think, the impact the Iran war is going to have. And I think we're just starting to see some of the cracks due to escalating oil prices and depleting inventories. So any of the casualties you're seeing now, I think we're first inning. The reason the stock market has been soaring is that corporate profits have been good. And I think across most of corporate America right now, most CEOs have had fairly rosy projections about what their profitability will be through the rest of the year. But the restraining force on all that are human beings. Consumer spending is 66% of GDP growth. When consumers don't have money in their pockets and can't spend, there's a discernible economic impact from that. And so the gas prices we're seeing right now could get and may likely get worse certainly if we don't get the Strait of Hormuz reopened again soon. The tariffs still have this sort of looming effect over everything, and the Iran war and the tariffs are both epic self-owns by Donald Trump. He is not numerate. I've sat in his office. He's in real estate, and he doesn't know what net present value is. He's not familiar with cash flow. He's gone He's filed 6 corporate bankruptcies. He almost went personally bankrupt once. He has just been insulated from the realities of the world by his own wealth his entire life. And so how average people live and breathe, and how the corporations who depend on a sound, functioning federal government that regulates with rationality, that pursues policies with rationality, are now in the crosshairs.
So, Natasha, Tim mentioned the stock market, and there's another part to this, which is the jobs reports that came out. And I think the administration was quick to point to both of these this week as being indicators of a strong economy, and that, and we hear the talking points from other officials that once the Iran war is over, gas prices will drop, and things are already starting to look a little bit rosy. How do you square that with what everyday Americans are feeling and hearing? How do the numbers tell a story that is slightly different than what people experience?
I agree with some of what Tim is saying about being in relatively early innings. And in part, you see a job market that is holding up quite well. The jobs number was around 144,000, way above expectations on Friday. You also see a stock market that is doing quite well, and a lot of corporations reporting that they expect to continue to see earnings growth over the course of the next many quarters. But the challenge is, and what I want your viewers to kind of understand, is the stock market shouldn't be understood as being able to internalize for us and tell us about risks that are on the horizon in real time. If you go back to now what feels like ancient history, but in 1987, we had periods where it looked like valuations were high. It looked like we were on the edge of a bubble, but the stock market kept going up, up, and up until all of a sudden on one day it lost 20% of its value at once. And so we know what the implications of a lot of these types of policy errors are. We know that when you do things like have trade wars against allies and adversaries alike, when you have a war that has raised energy prices, this administration wanted to see gas prices under $2 a gallon. Now you have analysts saying they might well be $5. We know what the consequences are for inflation, and we know what the consequences are for uncertainty with respect to how the economy functions and not knowing what the next twist and turn is from this administration's perspective. And what I think you're seeing so far in those numbers, Eamon, is something we think about a lot as we're thinking about this administration's policies, which is that in some sense, they inherited an economy that was quite strong, and an economy that is likely to see massive productivity gains from AI that is going to be disruptive, but is going to be transformational and already is. And instead of kind of riding an economy that was doing well, we have made a lot of choices, and those choices are hugely detrimental to American economic security.
All of this has ended up being a really interesting, live case study in consumer psychology as well, because our colleague Alex Tabbitt has been out, at one gas pump to another, talking to Americans all over the place. And, often you hear a lot of what I think you would expect, which is people saying that they're in a lot of pain, they're feeling like they're barely able to save. They're worried about their children. They're thinking about having to go out to get another job, and they don't know how that is going to go for them. But then you occasionally see him come across people who are living in some kind of Trump bubble. And I want you to take a listen to one of the conversations he had with a Donald Trump supporter.
How do you feel about your vote for President Trump right now, given these gas prices, given the fact that this war is continuing?
It's got to get bad before it gets good. So he's trying to fix it. Got to give the man some time.
Is there anything that he could do or say that would make you lose your support for him?
No, there's nothing he can do or say to make me lose the support for him. I believe in him 100%. He's a good man.
So, Tim, he just believes in him 100%. He thinks that it's got to get bad before it gets good. Is that how things work?
That's actually a Trump line. I think Bessent has said something to that effect. Howard Lutnick has, I think, in reference to Iran, that this is worth the pain for everyone. I think that Trump voter is probably a cultist. And Donald Trump has a big, vast, not vast, but a significant part of the electorate that he can do no wrong. And that's the culty part of where the MAGA voter is. He's not going to, the GOP can't keep surfing on MAGA voters. There's been a huge growth in independence, and there's a huge reason that shift is happening, and it's because of the economy. It's because the reality of what Trump's doing is coming home to roost for voters. That's why the GOP's in trouble going into the midterms. And I think for the Trump voters who don't want to say he's let me down, and I'm going to change my vote, or I'm going to change my party, or I'm just not going to vote at all. They're of a different ilk, and I think they've bought into the idea that he's infallible.
Well, and they see the alternative as a worse option than Trump, who they are stuck with for the indefinite future. Natasha, what I want to ask you is about this summit in Beijing, because it does touch on AI on many levels. It's a trade war, tariffs, but Trump is going to take CEOs of Boeing. He's taking the CEO of Apple. He's also taking the CEO of NVIDIA. And it really is such a change in policy from the Biden administration when it comes to chips. And so what do you expect to see from this summit with Xi?
You know, it's hard to predict what we are likely to see, in part because the contours of the discussion are shifting in relatively real time. Just a few days ago, we had another trade court ruling against the Trump administration's tariffs that they're levying and the Section 122 authority that they're using to levy tariffs against China. And so part of the challenge, I feel like, from a negotiating perspective is exactly what are the rules of the road with respect to the capacity that this administration has to try to take some of these tools that they view as enormous negotiating tactics vis-a-vis China and actually effectuate policy that implements against them. And I think that is a deep and unanswered question. And my hope for the summit, frankly, is I think that there are really difficult and challenging questions with respect to national security with vis-a-vis China, and also with respect to the future of artificial intelligence, where having this sort of approach that looks like it is in a state where we are trying to race to AGI is definitely an approach, but one that has a set of consequences that are tenuous for global security. And so I think that these are hard conversations, and frankly, I wish them well. I hope that they are able to have conversations that are meaningful with respect to ensuring American national security.
Well, and because of Trump's fumbles, Xi comes into the summit with the upper hand.
In a statement reacting to the Virginia Supreme Court's decision to block the state's newly drawn and voter-approved congressional map, the Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says, quote, over 3 million Virginia citizens cast their votes in a free and fair election, yet the state Supreme Court has chosen to invalidate their voice, disenfranchise them, and violate their due process rights. The decision to overturn an entire election is an unprecedented and undemocratic action that cannot stand. MAGA Republicans have adopted voter suppression as a strategy, as also evidenced by far-right extremists on the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act to open the door to a Jim Crow-like attack on black representation across the American South. We are exploring all options to overturn this shocking decision, no matter what it takes. House Democrats will win in November so we can help rescue this nation from the extremism being unleashed by Donald Trump and Republicans. Our fight is not over. We are just getting started, end quote. The Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York joins me now. Congressman, thank you for being with us. Let me ask you this. At some point, the polling indicates the likelihood that Democrats will take the House in November. History suggests the likelihood that that'll happen. Are you a little worried that this nutty, out of control gerrymandering actually compromises that possibility?
No, we're going to win back the House of Representatives in November. We are only 3 seats short. We historically overperformed in November. And that's one of the reasons why Republicans are in panic mode. Remember, Ali, when we took the House back in 2018, we were 24 seats short. We crossed over that hurdle, and in fact, in 2018, we flipped a total of 40 seats. So we're going to take back control of the House of Representatives. We're going to continue to make clear to the American people that we will lower their high cost of living, fix a broken health care system, and clean up the corruption that we're seeing in the country, in the Congress, certainly with the Supreme Court, and deal with the most corrupt administration in American history. Now, we're going to need nationwide judicial reform. We're going to need nationwide electoral reform. We're going to need nationwide campaign finance reform, which is why we have to take the House back, take the Senate back, keep pressing forward, and then in 2028, take the presidency back as well.
So I'm going to talk to you about those 3 areas of reform that you suggest. You heard Elie Mystal saying he puts judicial reform at the top of that. But I want to talk about something else. Of those things, you say you're going to talk to people and win their votes over based on their cost of living and their health care. That message is being very clearly put forward by an increasing number of progressive candidates who are winning primaries. That sometimes feels out of sync with both the Democratic Party and who House leadership wants to run in primary elections. And you face some criticism for this. Where are you on this? Because the people winning elections right now tend to be putting that message forward very clearly.
Well, since January of 2025, in my first remarks to the new Congress, we made clear that we're going to center lowering the high cost of living. America's far too expensive right now. People are working hard, they're playing by the rules, and they can't thrive, they can barely survive. That's a universally held belief amongst Democrats in the House across the ideological spectrum, from progressives to New Dems to Blue Dogs and all points in between. And what we've seen across the country, we've now won elections for 16 consecutive months, including in places like New Jersey, where Governor Mikey Sherrill ran on affordability. The New York City election, Zohran Mamdani ran on affordability. In Virginia, Abigail Spanberger ran and won on affordability. This is a universally held belief. I don't get involved in open seat Democratic primaries. We'll see who emerges, but the focus has got to be on winning in November, and that's what we intend to do.
What about non-open seat primaries, challenges from progressives who say that establishment Democratic leadership has not moved fast enough and hard enough?
Well, we're going to continue to defend every single House incumbent. Ultimately, however, it's going to be up to the people, and that's the reality of serving in the House of Representatives, the institution the framers designed to be the closest to the American people. We have only 2-year employment contracts. We've got to go back to the people every other year, and everyone is going to have to make their case to the individuals that they're privileged to represent. And that's what, they'll continue to do. And I've indicated, whether it's a progressive incumbent, whether it's a Blue Dog, whether it's a New Dem, I'm going to support members of the House Democratic Caucus. And then we all have to come together to actually push back against this unprecedented attack on our democracy, unprecedented attack on free and fair elections, and unprecedented attack on black representation in the American South and all across the country, which is what the Supreme Court's decision in Calais has unleashed.
Let's talk about that for a second, because you and I from New York, we don't live, there's not a daily lived experience of Reconstruction and the end of it and Jim Crow laws. In the South, there still is. Like, people have either in recent memory or they still experience things like that. This is being described as like the end of Reconstruction. It's that serious. It took decades, 7 decades, to get out of that mess and get back to 1965. How do you get people in New York and California and Minneapolis and places like that to think about the fact that this is everybody's fight right now? This isn't just black people's fight.
It's certainly everybody's fight. Listen, Dr. King once eloquently made the observation that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that's the reality of what we confront right now. So it is everybody's fight to show up and stand up and speak up. Now, the American journey has always been characterized by moments of progress, followed by moments of backlash. And then a new generation of Americans have to show up, stand up, speak up, fight, get into good trouble to usher in an era of progress. We went from the progress of emancipation to the backlash of Jim Crow, the progress of the civil rights movement to the backlash of mass incarceration, the progress of electing Barack Obama to the backlash that has resulted in the elevation of Donald Trump, MAGA extremism, and this behavior that we're seeing coming out of the Supreme Court of the United States to throw the American South back into the Jim Crow era. So it's going to take an all-hands-on-deck effort, and everybody has a stake in preserving a multiracial democracy as part of the effort to preserve American exceptionalism as we move forward into our next 250 years.
There's nothing that Republicans are doing now that's anything of a surprise, because they wrote it all down in a 922-page book that Donald Trump denied having anything to do with, and then they're implementing all of it. Should there be a Democratic equivalent of that? Should there be this is actually how we're going to fix all of these problems: judicial reform, electoral reform, nonpartisan redistricting, campaign finance, and everything else?
Yeah, well, certainly I think a lot of that has been laid out by House Democrats, and we will continue to lay out what we think needs to be done in order, one, to solve the problems that the American people want us to address in terms of an affordable life, a comfortable life, giving them the ability to live a middle-class life or beyond, live the good life. At the same period of time, we do have these structural problems that need to be addressed. We've got to, for instance, make sure we pass the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act so we can end the era of voter suppression in the United States of America once and for all. We have to end Citizens United, dramatically reform our campaign finance laws to stop the ability of these deep-pocketed special interests to intervene. And we are going to have to explore massive judicial reform, state by state, and at the federal level, and everything should be on the table as far as I'm concerned.
Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for being on the show this morning. We appreciate it. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York is the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives.
With the nation's 250th birthday just 2 months away, the president's pet projects are moving at what a White House spokesman tells the New York Times is Trump speed. The administration bypassed oversight of his latest project to turn the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool blue, according to new reporting from the Times. It invoked an exemption meant for urgent situations and gave a $6.9 million no-bid contract to his former pool guy at one of his golf courses. Meanwhile, the Qatari-gifted jet that Donald Trump plans to temporarily use as Air Force One is getting painted red, white, and blue. The president says it is set to be ready by July 4th. Joining me now, we have Tim O'Brien, Senior Executive Editor, Bloomberg Opinion, MS Now political analyst as well. So welcome, Tim. So look, the painting of this pool, it is just another example of the president bypassing oversight and laws to get a pet construction project done quickly. I mean, do you remember how shocked people were when the historic White House East Wing was suddenly bulldozed? So why is he avoiding public scrutiny if he is confident his projects are so beautiful and fabulous, as he might put it, for the country?
Well, I think the most charitable interpretation is that he just wants to move quickly and he doesn't want to be encumbered by regulations, by other people's input, by other people's taste. Trump has a very idiosyncratic, peculiar dose of bad taste in much of the stuff that he builds, and he likes to do it on his own. I think the more critical observation is, where's the money going? You know, if you look at the East Wing project, that began, when he decided to turn it into a new mega ballroom. It was going to be $250 million. It was going to be privately funded. Taxpayers wouldn't pay a dime. And they set up some sort of a structure to receive those funds. And in the months since, the price tag has escalated into the high hundreds of millions. It's now $1 billion. Estimates, and taxpayers are going to be on the hook for it, according to a new bill moving through Congress. Well, what happened to the original money, that was raised to pay for this privately, and in everything else he's touching? His presidential library in Florida, the Triumphal Arch he wants to build a Memorial Bridge, even the contract for painting the reflecting pool. There is this whiff of grift around all of it, that somehow the money, it's not just a monument to himself, which is troubling enough. It's not skirting the interests of the American people, which is troubling enough. But there also is this suggestion, or at least a very strong indication, that some of the money is channeling it back into Trump or his friends' pockets, which is also a problem.
Well, that latter point, friends' pockets, apparently that $6.9 million no-bid contract goes to his former pool guy at one of his golf courses. So to that point, you have the Qatari plane, which has raised serious ethical and legal questions over violating the Constitution's emoluments clause when accepting gifts from a foreign country. But Trump defends his action, saying this one is going to save Americans their taxpayer dollars. The Wall Street Journal reports, though, this so-called palace in the sky, that's going to keep its lavish interior. The $400 million U.S. taxpayer dollars spent on modifying the plane, that all went towards security measures. I mean, it's Air Force One, right? You've got to have them. So what do we know for certain? I mean, is it guaranteed that Donald Trump is going to put this plane, once he leaves office, into a library? Because there's been question about where that library will be. Will it be built big enough to house a plane, or might he still just use it to fly around?
I suspect he will use it to continue to fly around, probably until he passes, at which point maybe it'll end up in a library. But I think his designs on this is to use it until he can't use it anymore. And it, again, in this case, it's not simply taxpayers being put on the hook to upgrade a plane for his use as president and ultimately his personal use. It's also he's accepting a gift from a foreign government that has national security concerns that present themselves in a region in which we are in a war. Everyone is scrambling to get the favor of the United States, not just militarily, but technologically. And Trump is skirting every kind of guardrail you would want around the White House, so something that appears to be a bribe isn't, in fact, a bribe. And that's certainly what this jet represents.
Let me quickly ask you about Trump Media and Technology Group, of course, the owner of Truth Social, announcing this week it lost over $400 million in the first quarter of this year. DJT is now trading at under $9 a share. That's down about 30% in this year. Their businesses span kind of weird mix of social media, cryptocurrency, and a $6 billion bet on nuclear fusion. But what does this tell you, Tim? Is Truth Media failing?
It certainly appears to be failing. Devin Nunes is not going to have a job as a CEO much longer. He didn't come into that job with any of the kind of requisite background to be the CEO of a company like this. Donald Trump has never had his hands on a publicly traded company that didn't end up in some sort of financial trouble ever over the last several decades. Anyone who invested money in Trump Media this go around has lost the lion's share of their money, even going if they invested it in several years ago. There was a period when people got in early, made money, but that's no longer true either. And certainly people who bought this stock when Trump got inaugurated have been taken to the cleaners. It doesn't have a viable business model, and it's evident in the numbers.
Tim O'Brien, we'll have you back again because there'll certainly be more to discuss. Thank you.
Mail-in voting is underway in California, and there appears to be no clear frontrunner in the high-stakes governor's race, even after two hotly contested debates this week. One poll shows Republican Steve Hilton leading, with fellow Republican and our next guest, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, trailing behind. During this week's debates, Sheriff Bianco defended his previous membership in the Oath Keepers militia, faced questions about seizing more than 500,000 ballots in California's redistricting election, and sparred over the state's sanctuary policies. And Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco joins us now. Sheriff, thanks for being here with us. You are running on law and order, and public safety is one of your big campaign platforms. So let's start there. On your record, so based on the crime data that your team submitted to the state, over your first 6 years in office, your department cleared around 9% of major violent and property crimes, and that puts you last among your fellow sheriffs in California. So those numbers aren't great. Why should voters in California trust you with their safety?
Well, the real numbers are out there. My county definitely knows what the numbers are. California DOJ knows what the exact numbers are.
Your staff submitted those numbers, though, sir.
Oh, no, we submitted numbers. That's just not the numbers that DOJ reports. What the real numbers show me is the #1 law enforcement agency in large agencies, and then overall we're #6. The 5 above us are smaller agencies, and they're doing a great job. But I'm very, very proud of my agency, my employees. We are by far one of the most proactive agencies in the entire country, and the 2.5 million people in Riverside County know that.
Sheriff, I want to ask you on the topic of law and order about your past membership in the Oath Keepers. The Oath Keepers are described by many experts and organizations and watchdogs as extremists, an anti-government organization, a group filled with people who believe in many conspiracy theories. There were Oath Keepers present at the insurrection on January 6th, at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville years ago. And just a few days ago, you told CNN that you were very proud of your past affiliation with the Oath Keepers. If you're so proud, why aren't you still involved with them?
Yeah, even in the question, I mean, the things that you're saying and the things that you laid out there, those aren't true. Those are all propaganda statements that you're reading off of a teleprompter or a piece of paper. And
were Oath Keepers not present at January 6th?
Stuart Rhodes, who founded the Oath Keepers, was convicted of seditious conspiracy for helping organize January 6th.
My law enforcement deputies and investigators have arrested numerous media personnel for child molestation. That doesn't mean any of you are child molesters, does it?
I don't see what that has to do with my question.
That is the most.
I asked you a very clear question, Sheriff.
How many exactly? Give us a number. How many media have you arrested for child molestation? That's a pretty serious charge, and great if you lock them up. But how many? Give us a number. Then you're bragging about one of your achievements.
It's exactly the point, because three people that were arrested at January 6th happen to be a member of an organization doesn't make the membership bad.
Okay, but I asked
the founder of the organization.
I asked you a very clear question that I think the voters of California, and I actually think Americans deserve to know. You said on a stage that you were very proud of your membership.
Told you,
if you are very proud, why are you not still in the Oath Keepers?
My exact words were, I am absolutely very proud of the oath I took to defend my Constitution. And if you guys would have taken the time to read the mission statement of the Oath Keepers and compare that to the ACLU, you would see that they're almost identical. Because a few people got in trouble that had association with it, don't label everybody in that organization as the same. This is why we're in this position in this country, because everybody has an opinion, everybody believes they're right, and no one wants to just go off of facts. We have to get emotionally involved in things that not only don't matter, but the majority of the time just aren't true. The Oath Keepers were founded as an organization of law enforcement and military personnel who swore an oath to defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign, domestic, and that's exactly what it was. And I am absolutely proud of it, and I will willingly die defending my Constitution and my country.
Okay, so if you're concerned about facts and you think people shouldn't be so focused on emotion, who won the presidential election in 2020?
Joe Biden was our president for 4 years. This is the reason why nobody watches MSBN. Joe Biden was our president for 4 years. This is the stupidest argument. Let me tell you what. Do you want me to tell you what all of that doesn't matter? In what's broken in California. President Trump didn't break California. President Biden didn't even break California. Failed Democrat policies in California have driven us to the brink of almost collapse. And it is proven 100% Democrat policy, supermajority over decades has destroyed California. And that's why a Republican's going to be elected as the governor of California.
So let me ask you about you seizing ballots. Do you regret the measure to seize ballots?
Why would I regret a criminal investigation into fraud? There were 611,000 ballots.
Did it lead to any convictions?
You guys blow my mind with it.
Sorry, I'm just asking you a quick question. Say yes or no question. Did it lead? I'm just asking a quick question. Did it lead to any convictions?
Well, not yet, because our failed attorney general embarrassment to law enforcement has used the legal system to put a halt to the investigation.
So you still think that there could be convictions as a result of the ballots that you seized in an attempt to overturn a democratic election in this country? I just want to make sure I understand that correctly. You're running in an election in which you think fraud...
I don't think you...
No, you're running in an election, just to be clear, you're running in an election in which you think fraud is taking place, like it did, and that's why you seized the ballots. So on one hand, you're telling voters to actually participate in the democracy that you're alleging could still lead to a conviction. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
I actually don't think you understand that question. There is an allegation of 611,000 ballots and 658,000 votes cast. So the obvious, very, very easy investigation would be to count the ballots to see if it matched the number of votes that the machine said it counted. And if it did, then there's obviously no fraud. If it doesn't, then obviously there is something wrong. But no one wants those ballots counted in the Secretary of State's office or the Attorney General's office. And the real question should be why? Why don't you want those ballots counted?
So Sheriff, you mentioned that you are at odds with the Attorney General on this. In fact, you have defied direct orders, not only from the Attorney General, but from the governor in various circumstances, whether it's about
I don't answer to the governor. I don't answer to the governor. I don't answer to the Attorney General.
So that's where I'm going. If you were governor, as you are running to be, and sheriffs in the state of California disobeyed you, what would you do?
I wouldn't do anything, because in the Constitution, there's nothing in there that says they have to obey me. Isn't it funny that we want no kings, but we want a governor that controls law enforcement.
Just to clarify, let me give you a for instance. So you are running on a campaign that is in favor of cooperating with the Trump administration's immigration policies. That includes, according to your website, that you want to get rid of sanctuary-style policies. What if
it's a disaster?
What if sheriffs in the state of California decided they didn't want to go along with that because they think it is actually helpful for community safety to have good relations with the public and to not cooperate,
here's the beautiful
with ICE because they think it would be better for. So if they disobey you,
is it a question or a statement?
You're not answering the question.
You won't let me answer.
Okay,
so here's the whole thing. Here's the beautiful part. Here's the beautiful part about sheriffs in California. We obey the law. Imagine that. We obey the law. So as a governor, I can't tell anybody to break the law, and I would certainly not prevent them from enforcing the law. And that apparently that's what you want me to me to say.
You're completely defying directives, legal directives grounded in the law.
They're not.
They are. The Attorney General, who is the chief law enforcement officer of your state, certainly believes that. Governor Gavin Newsom, when he had COVID directives, you defied those as well. Now, you can say you thought they were bad,
absolutely.
But they were grounded in the law.
And on history, I was in the right. So obviously, his breaking the law didn't mean that I had to break the law for everybody else, because back to that whole oath for the Constitution, I actually value my oath. And this is absolutely nothing but a legal argument to prevent these ballots from being counted. And the Attorney General is wrong.
If you become governor and sheriffs decide that they do not, that their constitutional interpretation does not agree with yours, you will do nothing.
You just made up something, a hypothetical. You made that up that is not even based in reality.
That is exactly what happened when you.
It's not even close. You are so wrong in this. You have read a bullet point, and instead of investigating it yourself, you read a bullet point based on a political argument, and now you're arguing with me.
There's a whole lawsuit where the Attorney General is alleging that you are breaking the law, and you're saying your constitutional interpretation does not leave you beholden to what the Attorney General in the state says.
Why are you completely discounting my argument? Because you're a complete liberal Democrat that is blindly siding with a liberal Democrat who is an absolute embarrassment to law enforcement. And he has been since he's been in office.
Sheriff Chad Bianco, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. It's Bianco.
Thank you, Sheriff Bianco.